Righto, everyone. We might get the formal part of the day underway. It is intended to be fairly informal, the whole day. For those that are hanging around at LAMX, no doubt there'll be plenty of time to sit and try and absorb a whole lot of information, and this is a bit of an opportunity to kick off at the beginning of LAMX with those that are obviously staying on with it. But also at the same time catch up with others in the industry as well. So recognise we want to try and make as much time available for you guys to be able to chat and network amongst your tables and others that are here as well. First of all, welcome. It's great to see a nice turnout. Lovely that Adelaide's put on the weather for us. Lovely that Adelaide can host these sorts of things too. So welcome to the Sheep Sustainability Framework's annual update for 2024. So this is number 4 report. My first as the chair of the board, but no doubt an exciting thing, or last couple of months, it's more than 8 months, being involved in the board and seeing the progress of this thing is definitely been very interesting. It's I think a very valuable process to go through, and it's great to be able to release this report and demonstrate the progress that the industry is making in this stage. So first of all, I'd quickly like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Kurana people, and we'll pay my respects for the elders past and present. It's great to be here in Adelaide and to hold this launch in conjunction with LAMX. We have a big couple of days ahead and with all things sheep, and what better way to start the launch with the SSF, or Sheep Sustainability Framework's annual update. It's also great to see we've got a couple of other guests in the room, and I'd particularly like to note those from the American Lamb Board, the American Sheep Industry Association, Canadian Sheep Federation and Beef and Lamb New Zealand. It's great to be able to have colleagues from around the world be able to share some of the information that we've got available, but also at the same time have that two-way dialogue and learn some of the stuff that's going on in their markets. Because as a global sheep market, it's probably, well, it is the smallest protein in the world, I think, from a consumption point of view, unless you start talking goats. Don't know, has anyone ever found that number that says that goat is the most consumed protein in the world? A lot of people say it, but I've never found it anywhere. I think from a sheep point of view, whether that be wool or in the fibre space, or whether that be sheep meat and lamb in the meat space, I think it's important in terms of all these regions that are producing it to be able to work together, because compared to a poultry or a pork or a beef market out there, the numbers just aren't as big. So I think it's very important to work together. So we've also got a couple of the 2024 Next Generation cohort here as well from the Global Sheep Producers Forum. So welcome to those young, I'll call them young, I'm getting grey, young people in the room. It's good to see the next generation coming through. As I said, this is my first launch as chair of the board, and I'd like to acknowledge the support and the teamwork that happens to ensure that the Sheep Sustainability Framework is successful. Firstly, a big thank you to the steering group, Ed Dunn, Jane Kellogg, Locke Monsborough, Maria Crawford, Belinda Dexter, and the chair especially, Scott Williams. Their work is crucial in guiding the technical detail and the decisions behind the Sheep Sustainability Framework. I'd also like to acknowledge the work of Julian Collins and Anna Playfair-Hanny, who stepped down from the steering group this year. I'd also like to extend my thanks and congratulations to the Sheep Sustainability Framework Manager, Courtney Nelson, and the support she receives. Okay, I'll call him out because he and I work at the same place and he always gives me grief. But Locke, I hadn't got to the end of the paragraph for that clap. So a big thank you. A big thank you to Courtney and all the work she does, and a big congratulations as well on pulling this off in terms of the launch of the report. And we also need to acknowledge the work by Emma Gittos-Bunting from the AWI as well, who helps with Courtney in the whole process. Without those two, a lot of the work that actually gets done probably wouldn't get done. We couldn't deliver on the report and all the other things that are done without the high standard of work that those two put into it, and I'd like to thank them for the work they did. Thanks, Lachlan. We should also note this is Courtney's first full-time year in the job and her first launch, and the steering group and board are both grateful for her support. I'd also like to thank my colleagues on the board, Bonnie Skinner, Joe Hall, Brett Smith, Steve Harrison, Jamie Heinrich and Ben Thomas. Again, a great group of people to get together and talk through the issues. I think just the right balance of people that are going to question things, but at the same time recognise our role and place in it. And I think from a sheep sustainability framework point of view, the group of people on that board serves a pretty important purpose in terms of making sure that the industry is all together on this. So it's very valuable to have all those people on the board giving up their time and working towards the eventual outcome we're looking for. And finally, I want to thank everyone in the supply chain, all the partners, and for the contributions and the participation, and for most of all, the producers who play a crucial role in the industry's ambitions around sustainability. The board and the steering group have worked hard to summarise the sustainability achievements of the industry in this year's annual report, and we've created a new easy-to-read dashboard. If anyone wants to jump on the Sheep Sustainability Framework website, it's up there. It's great. I love visual things. It's a nice, easy-to-read, pulls out the key points, a couple of clicks and you find the information that you need. You don't have to wade through the pages of the report. It's all exactly the same info. So that's up there, and it's live on the website, and we'll include the 2024 numbers as of today, I think, Courtney. So make sure you have a look at that if you need to. Well, you should have a look at that. But we also need to recognise from the producer's point of view, we're not just talking numbers. We're not just talking numbers in a report or on a website, but it does represent a whole lot of complex decisions that they must make every day on their properties, whether that be balancing the weather, the market, labour availability, cost of production, dozens of other factors, striving for that profitability of their business, but also in a sustainability context. And it's clear that we can see from producers, the producers are concerned and they are conscious about working towards more sustainable outcomes. We can see that in the updates we've given over the last couple of years and how we track that progress. So it's great to see. We recognise the situations that all of them go through in the process to getting that. We also need to note that there is a high degree of complexity in farming, can sometimes mean that sustainability is a balance between what's realistic and achievable and financially viable. And in that way, sustainability is far from simple. And while this report summarises things into a single document, looking back on the last 12 months, we recognise that it may not cover everything. This year, we've added metrics around the rate of return on capital, which helps put this discussion into context. When we include capital growth, the industry has a healthy rate of return of about 9.7%. But when you take that capital growth out, that number was 0.8%. So there's no disputing that margins have been tight in particular areas, especially that have suffered from poorer seasonal conditions in the last 12 months. We've seen some pretty low prices, by my numbers, some of the lowest prices we've seen in the last 10 years. And we've seen costs that have been higher as well. So the profit margin in those businesses, a number of businesses have been put under pressure. But in saying that, we still see the gross value of industries has increased, rising from 4.4 billion to 4.6 billion, which is great. The gross value of wool has increased from 2.6 to 3.1 billion. So the overall industries are doing really well. A large part of this is the increase in value, especially for sheep meat, as a result of the large flock and the stronger slaughter numbers. Last year, the flock reached its highest level since 2007 at about 78.75 million head. And the MLA slaughter projections this year indicate we'll get a record supply of Australian sheep meat this year. So that's encouraging, but we've also got to be conscious in terms of the costs in the system and the margins that are in the industry at the moment. There are a couple of major highlights that we're particularly proud to report on in the annual update this year. These include that 4 of the 6 identified missing metrics were addressed over the past year with the inclusion on data on biodiversity and processing labour availability. We'll continue to improve the integrity of the framework by finding data for additional metrics as we work through. We've also created a greater alignment with the Australian Beef Sustainability Framework, which gives a more efficient reporting for multi-species operators, recognising many sheep producers are also cattle producers. And then in terms of the industry itself and some of the things in the report, as I mentioned, the gross value of production for sheep meat and greasy wool increased. We've also seen net greenhouse gas emissions generated by the sheep industry have generally been declining since 2018. And according to the Global Life Satisfaction Index, sheep graziers are more satisfied with their life than the average Australian. I did a couple of media interviews this morning. They jumped on that to say that the average Australian sheep producer is more satisfied than the average Australian. I think that's encouraging. There have been improvements in pain, and there have also been improvements in pain management adoption for most of the animal husbandry procedures. These achievements are particularly impressive given we know the industry has faced significant challenges over the last 18 months. We saw sheep prices sink to historical lows, as I mentioned, in some cases the lowest in 10 years, coinciding with very dry conditions across large parts of the country, particularly these southern areas around southern Vic, or southern Australia, southeast Australia and Western Australia. We've also seen shifts in the policy landscape, most notably legislating the phase out of live sheep exports by 2028, and the industry, particularly those in Western Australia, now face a significant adjustment to the loss of that market. All of these things saw producer confidence drop to the second lowest levels in 15 years, yet we actually had a more satisfied Australian sheep producer than the average Australian. Tough conditions impact sustainability because sustainability is a holistic business equation, and they can make it harder to make new investments in the long term, shifting the business to greater focus on the medium term, short term outlooks. At the same time, improving business sustainability is an ongoing thing we all have to be conscious of. We can see producers continue to do their best with the information that they have available, information and resources they have available. There's also a lot to be positive about. In more recent times, seasonal conditions improved and the markets recovered. And on the international front, demand in key export markets appears to be improving, although some markets remain soft. And the entry into force of the Australian-United Kingdom Free Trade Agreement supports increasing trade volumes into that market. There are exciting opportunities for wool as well in emerging markets that are being explored, including into Bangladesh, Vietnam and Peru, and there's significant potential for wool processing in those areas. Even a portion of Australia's wool supply chain going, even a small proportion of Australia's wool supply chain going to these markets will help market diversification. And in Europe, the proliferation of sustainability legislation is coming to a head, and the wool industry are continuing to advocate strongly to ensure wool is not unfairly disadvantaged. Off the back of the successful industry marketing campaign Where Wool Not Fossil Fuel, the results saw a change in consumer perceptions over the longer term, with 75% of viewers saying they would consider wearing synthetic clothes less and 80% of viewers saying they now believe wool is good for the environment. Now, while macroeconomic conditions in markets are constraining demand for wool, the industry is optimistic and medium to long-term prospects remain strong. There's been some movement in some of our key indicators this report, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of them. You've all obviously got a copy of the report. I think there are a couple on each table, and there are a pile of them out there. And as I said, we've got that great new dashboard on the website, but a couple of them I just wanted to highlight. Almost all of the pain relief indicators trends have improved on last year, some of which by a considerable amount. We've seen a big jump in the number of producers who are measuring their greenhouse gas emissions using carbon accounting tools or similar. This increased from 3% to 10%, which is still 10%. It's not huge, but it's a significant improvement, and I think this is going to continue to increase as the tools and the knowledge increase. We've also seen an increase in the number of producers who are completing lifetime ewe management training from 9.4 to 11.4%, and we've seen and the other one to note is we've seen a decrease in the number of sheep transacted through NQSA sale yards from 50% down to 36%, although we believe this is probably a reflection of fewer sale yards being NSQA accredited. There have been shifts in several other indicators, and I encourage you to go through the report and have a look at them and pull out the ones that you think are of interest to you. Team's also added a number of indicators. We've got new baseline data on. These include the data around a number of producers with documented predator management strategies, the percentage of producers vaccinating for clostridial diseases, and several more. And moving forward, we'll continue to look at the best ways of measuring all our indicators, including refining and improving our existing metrics. In conclusion, I'm pleased to present this year's report. It's a huge effort bringing it together and reflects the great work of the industry and those on the steering group and the board itself. The Sheep Sustainability Framework is about connecting industry with all our customers in the supply chain and communicating our sustainability story. It's a great vehicle for industry and something for all of us to get behind. I'm happy to take any questions on this, but otherwise I'd just like to, I don't know how you do this, officially say that the annual report is launched. Feels like I should cut a ribbon. But thank you all for coming today and for the support and also for the input you provide into this process. It truly is an industry-driven initiative, and I think that's where a lot of the value actually sits within it, because in my opinion, I'll probably say this as an individual, I think if we don't take hold of some of the narrative in this space, someone else is going to take that space from us. So it's important that industry work on these things, and I congratulate the industry, the participants in our various working groups we had through the year, Courtney, and the whole steering group and the board for the production of this report. And encourage you all to have a read and to use it. Thank you. As I said, if there are any questions, I'm happy to try and answer those or deflect them possibly to the more appropriate person if there is in the room. So if there are any questions, we can run through those quickly before I introduce our keynote speaker. Have we got any questions? Got one from Terry.
Angus, confidence down, satisfaction up. Do you think there's something amiss with the metrics or how these things are being measured?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's Terry, isn't it? Yeah. It's a good question. And it's something that, we constantly consider in the process of, have we got the right data? Are we using the right information to measure these metrics? And granted, the survey that we've got is a brilliant tool for fleshing out some of this information, but yes, we are limited by the accuracy of that information and the context in sometimes when people actually report those. But I think what the important thing is to look at the longer term trends in a number of these as well, and see it through time and identify if there's a trend that needs support or addressing in that process, rather than picking the minute detail on a sort of an annual change in something that, may or may not necessarily reflect a point in time when someone filled out a survey or when someone was feeling more positive about something. Any other questions from the group? Joe, you're going to miss out on lunch, unfortunately. Are you right? Okay. I'm usually in the position where I'm giving a speech and lunch gets served and then I miss it. So I feel for Jo as I invite her up to the stage. I'll introduce her quickly to you whilst you're enjoying a lunch, and she'll continue through. So thank you for allowing us to get on with the agenda, Jo. Ms Jo Granger is the Assistant Secretary of the Trade and International Division at the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. She's got 19 years of public service experience and is currently working in the Trade and International Division supporting Australia's agricultural trade outcomes in bilateral and multilateral fora. Between January 2020 and December 2023, Jo was the Minister Councillor Agriculture based in Brussels, Belgium, leading Australia's agriculture trade relationship with Europe. No doubt most of you in the room would know where we sit in terms of our European Free Trade Agreement. I'm sure she's got some interesting perspectives on that. Prior to that role, she worked on industry policy across the wool, dairy, wine, horticulture, grains, sugar, cotton and small emerging industries, including leading work to establish the Dairy Code of Conduct and expanding the labour supply for agriculture sector. Please welcome Jo. Thank you. Jo Grant.